Now, last but not least, because we've got a beautiful hour, less than an hour, so I'd like to give a warm welcome to Danielle Scogan, who will run us through some of her stories, some of her practices and tools. And so the premise of the conversation, challenge and lessons and opportunities when measuring change in the field of gender inequality and gender-based violence. So welcome, Danielle, to the space, and it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Nico. It's such an honor to be here. I'm just going to get my screen share going and we'll get started. Great. So I hope everyone can share my screen. So as Nico said, my name is Danielle Scogan. I'm speaking here on behalf of two organizations that work in partnership, Canadian Humanitarian and Asociación Ser Niña, which is located in Guatemala. I am speaking to you from Medicine Hat. That is where Canadian Humanitarian's head office is located. So I just want to recognize that Medicine Hat is situated on Treaty 7 and neighbor of Treaty 4 territory, on the traditional lands of the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Stoney Nakoda, and the Tsuut'ina, as well as the Cree, Sioux, and Saulteaux bands of the Ojibwe peoples. And it is also the homelands of the Métis Nation within Region 3. So that is where I am speaking from today. Just a little bit about me for context to this presentation is I have a kind of unique role with these organizations. So I am the Program Development Director with Canadian Humanitarian. I have been working with them for just over 3 years, primarily in their grants and their project development, with a focus on their project centering on gender equity and girl and women empowerment. Prior to joining the Canadian Humanitarian team, I was also actually the co-founder of Asociación Ser Niña, which is a locally run gender equity and girl empowerment project in Guatemala. And so Ser Niña and Canadian Humanitarian are now partners. So part of my role does include supporting Canadian Humanitarian's work, which is actually primarily in East Africa, and now has the partner Ser Niña in Guatemala. So kind of my role continues to be, and was for this specific project I will speak to you about, overseeing the gender equity and gender-based violence programs in both Ethiopia and Guatemala. So the case study that I'm presenting about was a project that we ran throughout 2021 and 2022 in Guatemala, which was a whole family healing program. And the goal of the program was to really test the impact and effectiveness of running a holistic, family-centered, and gender equity-focused violence prevention and response program in Guatemala. It was a wonderful project, very long name. It's a bit of a mouthful to say every time, but that was the focus of it. For context, Asociación Ser Niña had already been working in Guatemala since 2014. So everything that I speak to, we already had very deeply rooted and longstanding relationships with the community where we ran this project. Actually, the community of El Hato, which is an indigenous Mayan community, we had been working there since 2014. It was one of Ser Niña's first community partners. So we did have really strong relationships there already, which is, I think, an important piece of knowledge for context as I move through the presentation. Also, Asociación Ser Niña had already been working in the field of gender equity and women and girls empowerment since they started. That is their core mission, is to advance gender equality in Guatemala. So as far as our team's training, we were training on a lot of new approaches, but we were not really training our team on gender equity, for example. They really already are experts in that field. So I know there's a lot of projects where maybe they're trying to incorporate more gender equity work. So I just want to kind of point out that potential difference as well for context. And though I'm the one presenting today, I really want to recognize that everything I'm sharing, all the learnings, all the insights, all the ups and downs are really kind of the culmination of hours and hours and months of discussion with our local team. I really consulted with them when we were reporting on the project, when I was even designing this presentation, to make sure that their most pressing ideas, concerns, and innovations were included. So though I'm the key presenter, I really want to recognize that everything I'm saying is really a collection of the expertise and leadership of our local team. The partners that we had in running this, again, it was a collaborative project between Canadian Humanitarian and Asociación Ser Niña, which is a program as well by the Real Girl Foundation out of the United States. So those were the implementing partners, and the project was possible through funding from the Fund for Innovation and Transformation, which is supported through Global Affairs Canada. The Fund for Innovation and Transformation, which you will hear me call FIT throughout the project, provided 100% of the funding for this project to be able to run. So we were incredibly grateful. It had been a project that we had wanted to launch for quite some time. It was definitely an innovative, it was a trial project. So we were incredibly lucky and grateful to have the support of FIT in trying something new. I wanted to give some context if there are some people that are not familiar with FIT's approach, just because I think it's important to recognize that one of the incredible things about working with the FIT Fund is that they truly do support learning, support ongoing feedback, support that innovation. Our goals of the project never shifted, but we sometimes did have to pivot how we were measuring change, our RBM structure. Also, we had to really reassess, and that's what I'm going to go into. And we were just incredibly thankful that this project was supported by a funder that not only was open to those learnings and the reformatting or reevaluations, but actually really supported that, really recognizing that the goal of any FIT funded project isn't really perfection, but truly is the learning and the, learning for ourselves and also sharing our learning, which is, the big goal in today's presentation. So as I said, the project that we were running was a whole family healing program. So Ser Niña since 2014 had been running girl empowerment workshops within the Guatemalan school system. In about 2017, we also began running positive masculinity workshops with the boys, but we had always focused only on working directly with children and really taking more of an educational based approach, really providing them with content heavy educational workshops. And though we are seeing incredible impact from our programs, we were also seeing a lot of challenges in truly seeing lasting change when it came to gender equity through our programs. And some of the key reasons for that was because, working with children, we could see them build agency and self-efficacy, but at the same time, they were then going home to families and societies that maybe were continuing to hold them back, especially the girls. They were maybe not fully on board with some of the messages that were included in our program. And so we really weren't setting up our children for success by not engaging more stakeholders in their community, most importantly, their family and their parents. So we had always been curious about what would happen if we started working more with families. Another key piece that we wanted to do really differently with this project was really the incorporation of working from a healing-based approach. One thing that through our, 6 or 7 previous years working in the field of empowerment is we recognized that though we were again seeing positive changes, the reality is we estimated that over 50% of our participants had been impacted by gender-based violence in some way. Often, many of them were direct victims or survivors of gender-based violence. So a lot of them were entering into our programs in a state of deep trauma and deep wounds. And so it's, from our experience, and one of our key learnings of the project is that we can't truly reach a state of empowerment if we don't first help heal the trauma that first is putting us in challenging positions, and that to just jump right into the empowerment pieces without including that healing is we're not going to see true lasting change. And so what we wanted to do differently with this project was engage the entire family to help all of them better advocate for girls and women and address gender inequality. We also wanted to include much more in-depth work when it came to healing. We continued to work with boys and men and grew that aspect of our program. As I said, in 2017, we did begin working with boys, but we had never worked with fathers before, or men in the community, so that was new. We did incorporate restorative justice approaches, and it was our entire curriculum and program was based on traditional Mayan healing practices as well. So those were kind of the key innovations, what we wanted to do differently than what we had been doing before, and what we saw almost all other organizations in the world and globally doing as well. We wanted to try something different. So the key goals of the project were we are aiming to decrease the rates of gender-based violence among participating families. We aim to increase and advance women and girls empowerment, increase gender equitable viewpoints, beliefs, and behaviors, and also improve the advocacy and support for women and girls empowerment. So we really wanted to see, most critically, changes at the individual level, seeing especially women, girls take more action in their lives and be able to create positive lives for themselves. But we also wanted to see changes at the family level and at the community level as well. So the key activities, how we actually went about trying to achieve these goals and implement this innovative approach was we continue to do weekly workshops with girls and boys. We customized the workshops a lot based on what we had done previously, so that it was much more focused on that healing component that I talked about. There is much more focus on a restorative justice lens and healthy relationships. Healthy relationships had always been part of our program, but this one really deepened that theme. We also began doing workshops with mothers, which was a brand new approach for us. So that was something that we had not done in the past. We also began doing workshops for fathers as well, as I mentioned. We were providing holistic support for survivors of violence. So survivors of violence that were identified or came forward were provided with therapeutic, psychological, legal, and medical support if required or if requested from our local team. We are providing regular individual, couple, and family therapy sessions. As I said, we wanted kind of shifts in those different layers. So individuals were working with us, especially the individuals that were survivors of violence, but we also worked with the couples within the families and had full family therapy sessions as well. Again, all of our therapy sessions were led by local Mayan healers and therapists. And then we also provided gender-focused community interventions. So as a gender-focused program, it's important that we're always taking into consideration the different power imbalances, the different power structures, the different obstacles that are facing people of different genders, and taking a really intersectional approach. So, and with it being a FIT-funded project, making sure that we were continuously doing in-depth gender scans to really understand the different and unique obstacles that might be affecting our participants. So based on the results of those, the in-depth scan at the start and then ongoing observations and feedback sessions during, we also provided some gender-focused community interventions that would just facilitate the participation in these other key activities and key areas. So overall, we are incredibly proud of the success of this project. It did wrap up in August of last year of 2022. So just for context and for knowledge, over the course of the program, we provided the in-depth support to 28 different families, all from the same Indigenous community. That included 148 children, 27 mothers, and 14 fathers. We provided in-depth support to 61 survivors of violence, provided 256 two-hour workshops and 510 therapy sessions. And we were able to see kind of some of the results that you'll see on your screen. So the number of cases of gender-based violence that were reported by participating families decreased by 45% over the course of the 15 months of implementation. 41 individuals from the program reported overcoming a specific situation of violence as a result of the project, and 79% of individuals reported that they felt safer in their homes and felt safer in their families after the project. We also had improved mean scores on the positive relationships and psychological well-being scales that we use to measure change. We also saw increased empowerment from the women and older girls that were taking the program, and increased commitment from community members to take more action to better support girls and women. And also we did various assessments to measure attitudes towards women and beliefs about gender. And at the end of the project, we saw more egalitarian viewpoints towards women and gender equality. Though it was an incredible success, it was not easy. We had met with a lot of challenges or a lot of opportunities to grow as an organization. I think as an organization, we are so incredibly grateful for the opportunity that we were given, because we learned so much through this project that is actually continuing, has even transformed how we do our work today in all of our projects, not just this whole family healing program. But I really kind of wanted to share, as we're talking about RBM and we're talking about measuring change, of some of the challenges that we faced and how we overcame them. So there were a lot of challenges when it comes, that's the theme of my presentation. When you're working in the field of gender equity or gender-based violence, it can be tough. There's a lot of taboo subject matter. There's a lot of very sensitive subject matter that you're working with, long-standing, centuries-old programming of silence. So it can be really hard to collect data. And what we found during this project was that even when we looked up, how other organizations were doing it, how it's been done in the past, we never quite found solutions that really targeted these ideas. We found a lot of workarounds or a lot of projects that would bypass it or skip it, but never really anything that truly solved for the problem. And that's what we aim to do, is to find ways to not just work around it or skip over this challenge, but tackle it head on. So some of the challenges that we faced, which I'm sure I will be speaking to people that have faced these themselves, but I do want to give some context to our project. As you could hear from the results, we were working really hard to measure change on the rates of gender-based violence. There's a lot of ethical challenges when it comes to collecting data on this. Obviously, there's ethics when it comes to what kind of data you can collect, child protection policies, things like that. Also, there's obligation to report when you're collecting data on some of these factors. It's very, very important that you have a very strong PSEA policy, because that could be coming up even just in your baseline. And also beyond kind of the legal components and the liability components, there was also the ethical question of, are we putting any of our participants at risk even asking these questions? When you're doing your baseline interviews, when you're doing your baseline questionnaires, could asking those questions put them at risk? Could a husband that knows that his wife is answering XYZ question, could that put her at risk? Could it put children at risk? So we really had to work hard on the ethics of any of our RBM strategies. I think there are a lot of structures in place to protect organizations and to ensure ethics. One of the pieces that was a bit more of a surprise was the challenge on gathering authentic data. And this is something we talked about at length. We really had our whole team working on this, not just our measure and evaluation experts, or not just our reporting team, but really therapists were contributing ideas, community activists. And one thing that we found is that it is hard, if not almost impossible, to get accurate data, especially at the baseline, when it comes to assessing gender equity indicators and gender-based violence indicators. And this for us was something that we're still, I think, trying to communicate hard on, is that there's a really big gap in information on getting truly reliable baseline data for a number of reasons. First of all, a lot of the information that you might get at baseline could very likely not be true. The reality is, even though we'd been working in the community for many years, we did not have, deep relationships with each individual that was participating. So the trust is not established at the start of the project. Participants may not trust you or the evaluators or the staff enough to be 100% honest when asking some of these more complex questions related to gender equity and gender-based violence. There's also the problem of many of these issues are silenced. One thing that we heard over and over and over again is that, you know, violence in the home is meant to be dealt with by the family. It's a family issue. It's not an issue for the government to solve. It's not an issue for police or social services or an organization like us to solve. It's a family issue and something to be managed within the family. So there was a lot of silencing of the issues where a lot of survivors of violence wouldn't feel comfortable giving you an honest answer, especially at the start of the program, because it would feel like a betrayal to their family, of the trust to their family, because it's supposed to be dealt with within the family. Another thing that caused some of the information to potentially be inaccurate or could put at risk the accuracy of the information you collect is that the normalization of violence is very predominant, not only in Guatemala, but in so many countries where gender-based violence is at endemic levels. What we found was that sometimes if you were to ask a participant if they were facing, you know, XYZ violence indicators, they could say no, because it's so normalized in their culture. For example, you know, having a father hit a child is seen as discipline. It's not seen as violence. So they would answer with genuine, even if they thought they were giving that true answer, say no. But then after they've gone through the program, they've learned about different, you know, definitions of definitions of violence, examples of violence. Then they may start to realize, oh, well, I answered no at the baseline, but now at the midline, I'm going to say yes, because I actually I'm recognizing that what I've experienced my whole life, you know, does go against my human rights, is a form of violence. And then so then you can have some skewed numbers because your baseline might look better for a number of reasons. For example, people are not telling you the truth, or maybe they don't understand the question, and then they're rating the situation potentially more harshly at the closing time. And really, there is another risk that it could put the project success and participation levels at risk if, you know, if you're coming in really strong at the start with questions about gender-based violence to get your baseline. It could make people feel a bit uncomfortable, you know,
l'impact de rendre les gens
yet to be asking those questions. So those were some of the challenges we faced. Despite the challenges, I think there were also a lot of opportunities. As I said, we were able to overcome them with a lot of creativity. Some of the opportunities that existed, or some of the things that we really learned and helped us with success, was making sure that we're incorporating healing-based and trauma-informed approaches to our measure and evaluation strategy. So that would be one of my biggest pieces of recommendation, is if working in this field, even if you don't, we did have therapists on as our project implementation team, but even if not, they should be consulted deeply when it comes to designing the RBM structure, so that all evaluation tools, surveys, questionnaires, and things like that are very trauma informed. Another thing that we did, as I said, is we really engaged the entire team. We did not just have, you know, the measure and evaluation team working in a bubble. We really quickly realized that everyone on the team had really important insights into truly measuring this change, especially with the challenges that we faced. So we had our therapist, you know, co-designing the performance measurement framework. We had educators, we had community activists. Everyone that was involved in the project was supporting that measure and evaluation design. We really work to recognize more holistic and authentic indicators of change, kind of moving away from that black and white thinking and black and white question asking that a lot of organizations fall into to be able to get more reliable data. We also increased the focus and quality of qualitative data. We really recognize that we are getting invaluable information from qualitative data, from interviews, from focus groups. So we really opened ourselves up to trying to collect as much of that data as possible. And then again, just by engaging the entire team, really prioritizing the local leadership and local knowledge to inform the RBM strategy that we were we are creating. Some of the solutions that we came up with, just continuing. And again, I'm going to try to be specific to paint a picture, but not too specific so that it's still helpful for a collection of projects. But we were really working to avoid simple questions that are too pointed. We really work to measure indirect indicators or signs of key issues. So if you can't ask the question directly for all the issues that I've been talking about so far, we said, what would be some indicators of a decrease in gender-based violence that go beyond just this black and white questioning, right? This yes or no answer. And some of those included like asking a collection of questions that were softer, but could gauge what their lived experience is. Some of the questions we asked, as I said at the start, for example, focused on feelings of safety, their confidence in their ability to communicate. How did they feel heard or supported by their spouse or their father or their mother, depending on who they were in the family. We also really, again, with the qualitative data, we prioritize things like home visits and observations by our therapists and our team of psychologists to really gauge home dynamics as well. And we also did really looking at other indicators that might show change, such as levels of well-being. Obviously, if someone is in a situation of violence continuously, they will most likely show lower levels of psychological well-being. So we are measuring changes in well-being as well as self-efficacy using internationally recognized and peer-reviewed evaluation tools for those. In conclusion, I know I'm kind of running a bit behind, so I'll try and wrap it up. But if I were to really summarize our biggest takeaways or recommendations for any project that is working on a gender equity-based project, gender-based violence project, or even a project that is not, maybe gem marker 3, but still has that gender component, is recognizing that you need to incorporate a trauma-informed approach. It is highly likely that any project will be working with survivors of violence, whether it's on our awareness or not. So making sure that our approach, not only in the project implementation, but also in the RBM structure, is very trauma-informed. Really engaging in a diverse team of experts, not only relying on measure and evaluation experts to create your performance measurement framework or logic model, but really using therapists, community activists, educators. Look at your team. You have a diverse and incredible team. Use them at all aspects of the project, including that RBM design. Really opening up to yourself to diverse tools and mechanisms for monitoring and evaluation. Like I said, we opened ourselves up much more to more focus groups, more interviews. We were doing surveys and questionnaires. We were doing observations. So really being more open and expansive to what monitoring and evaluation could look like. And that prioritization of qualitative data was really incredible for our project. And then really passing it on to the local community. Our local team really were the ones who were spearheading the design of our performance measurement framework and how we were truly measuring the project and measuring change. So that was some of our biggest takeaways.